You're too filthy for this family. Elise Moreau's venomous whisper sliced through the glittering Manhattan gala, her words aimed at Ayanna Carter, the black nanny clutching young Oliver's hand. Thomas Reed, a real estate billionaire, overheard, his heart pounding with rage. 6-year-old Oliver's tearful eyes locked onto Ayanna, sparking Thomas's resolve. A hidden camera confirmed Elise's cruelty, igniting a confrontation that shattered facades. Choosing love over status, Thomas protected Ayanna and Oliver, embarking on a journey to forge a true family rooted in compassion. Will secrets unravel further? Can kindness triumph over prejudice? Dive into this gripping tale of betrayal and redemption. Readers may predict a clash of class and heart, with Thomas redefining family against all odds. Rate it 1 for its emotional pull, or 0 if it falters. The chandeliers cast a golden glow across the Manhattan mansion, their crystal prisms scattering light like stars trapped in glass. Laughter and jazz swirled through the air, mingling with the clink of champagne flutes as New York's elite toasted the engagement of Thomas Reed and Elise Moreau. The ballroom pulsed with opulence, marble floors, velvet drapes, and a string quartet weaving melodies that felt both timeless and hollow. Amid the revelry, a 6-year-old boy sat tucked in a corner, his small fingers clutching a worn picture book, his world shrinking under the weight of adult chatter. Thomas Reed, the real estate titan whose name adorned skyscrapers, stood at the room's heart, his navy suit sharp as a blade, but his green eyes flickered with unease, searching for his son. Somewhere, in the shadows of this glittering night, a single sentence would unravel everything. Thomas adjusted his cufflinks, the silver glinting as he nodded at a senator's anecdote. His broad shoulders carried the confidence of a man who'd built an empire from nothing, but beneath the polished exterior, a quiet ache gnawed at him. His son Oliver hadn't smiled, really smiled, since Clara, his late wife, slipped away 3 years ago. Thomas had buried himself in deals and boardrooms, hoping wealth could fill the void, but Oliver's silence was louder than any contract he'd signed. He scanned the room, spotting Elise gliding through the crowd, her gold-slit dress catching every eye, her curly hair cascading like a crown. She was his future, or so he'd convinced himself, a partner to match his ambition, to polish his legacy for Oliver. Yet something about her polished charm felt like a mirror, reflecting only what he wanted to see. Oliver sat cross-legged on a velvet settee, his red shirt slightly untucked, his light blue pants scuffed at the knees from earlier play. The picture book in his lap, The Starry Night, was Clara's favorite, its pages worn from her bedtime readings. His brown eyes, so like his mother's, traced the illustrations, but they kept darting to the crowd, searching for safety. Beside him knelt Ayanna Carter, the nanny who'd become his anchor. Her dark skin glowed under the soft light, her blue maid's uniform crisp, her straight hair pinned neatly in a bun. She leaned close, her voice a gentle hum, like a lullaby against the chaos. "Your mom loved this story, didn't she? The way the stars danced on the page." Oliver nodded, his small hand tightening on the book, a faint smile breaking through his guarded expression. Ayanna's presence was a quiet rebellion against the room's artifice, her warmth a tether to the memories Oliver clung to. Thomas caught sight of them, his heart easing for a moment. Ayanna had been with them for a year, her patience and stories about Clara keeping Oliver grounded when Thomas's grief left him distant. He excused himself from the senator, weaving through the crowd, drawn to his son's corner. But before he reached them, Elise appeared, her heels clicking sharply on the marble. Her smile was perfect, practiced, but her eyes held a glint of steel. "Ayanna," she said, her voice low but cutting, "Oliver shouldn't be up this late. Take him to bed." Oliver shrank back, clutching the book tighter, his small frame tensing as if bracing for a storm. Ayanna rose, her movements calm, but her eyes flickered with something unspoken. "Of course, Miss Moreau," she said, her tone steady, betraying no hurt. As Ayanna guided Oliver toward the hallway, Elise's voice dropped to a venomous whisper, meant only for her. "And Ayanna, you're too filthy for this family. Clean yourself up before you touch him again." The words landed like a slap, sharp and deliberate. Oliver froze, his small hand gripping Ayanna's, his eyes widening with shock and fear. Ayanna's face remained composed, but her fingers trembled slightly, betraying the sting. Thomas, steps away, caught every syllable, his breath catching in his throat. The room seemed to tilt, the laughter and music fading into a dull roar. Filthy? The word burned, a betrayal not just of Ayanna, but of the trust he'd placed in Elise. His pulse thundered, rage and disbelief warring within him. He looked at Oliver, whose tearful gaze locked onto Ayanna, pleading for her to stay. Ayanna knelt to Oliver's level, her voice soft but firm. "It's okay, little man. Let's get you to bed." She smoothed his hair, her touch a quiet defiance against Elise's cruelty. Oliver clung to her, whispering, "You're not dirty. You're like Mommy." The words pierced Thomas's chest, a reminder of Clara's kindness, the kind Elise seemed incapable of. He wanted to storm forward, to confront Elise then and there, but the crowd pressed around him, their eyes oblivious to the fracture forming in his world. Elise turned away, her smile snapping back into place as she rejoined a group of guests, her gold dress shimmering as if nothing had happened. Thomas's fist clenched, his mind racing. How had he missed this side of her? How had he let her near his son? He slipped into the hallway, following Ayanna and Oliver at a distance. The mansion's corridors were quieter, lined with portraits of forgotten ancestors, their eyes seeming to judge his choices. Oliver's small voice echoed, "Why did she say that, Ayanna? You're not bad." Ayanna paused, her silhouette framed by a soft glow from a sconce. "Some people say mean things when they're scared, Oliver, but you don't have to believe them." Her voice was steady, but Thomas caught the faint quiver, the weight of years spent swallowing such barbs. He thought of her resume. Born in Harlem, a teacher who'd left her job under vague circumstances, now a nanny who'd brought light back to Oliver's eyes. Filthy? The word churned in his gut, an insult to everything she'd done for his son. Thomas leaned against the wall, his suit suddenly feeling too tight, his empire too heavy. He remembered Clara reading The Starry Night to Oliver, her laughter filling their old brownstone before cancer stole her away. Ayanna had kept that memory alive, while Elise seemed determined to erase it. He pulled out his phone, texting his security chief. "Pull the footage from the ballroom now." He needed proof, not just for himself, but to understand how deep Elise's cruelty ran. Oliver's tear-streaked face flashed in his mind, and he felt a pang of guilt for not seeing sooner how much his son needed protection, not from the world, but from the woman he'd chosen. Ayanna led Oliver to his room, tucking him in with the book beside his pillow. "You keep those stars close, okay?" she said, her smile masking the hurt Thomas knew she felt. Oliver nodded, his small hand still holding hers. "You won't leave, right?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Ayanna's eyes softened. "Not as long as you need me." Thomas watched from the doorway, unseen, his heart twisting. He'd built towers that touched the sky, but he'd failed to shield his son from pain. Elise's words echoed, a poison seeping into his resolve. He wouldn't let this pass. The camera footage would come, and with it, the truth. But tonight, as Oliver drifted to sleep and Ayanna stood guard, Thomas felt something shift, a father's instinct awakening, ready to fight for the family that mattered. The ballroom's music drifted faintly, a cruel reminder of the facade he'd almost bought into. Elise was out there, charming the elite, oblivious to the storm she'd unleashed. Thomas's jaw tightened, his decision forming like concrete setting. He'd trusted her to be a partner, a mother to Oliver, but she'd shown her true colors. Ayanna, with her quiet strength, had been the one holding his son's world together. As he turned back toward the party, his phone buzzed. A message from security. Footage secured. Thomas's pulse quickened. The night wasn't over, and neither was his fight. The jazz from the ballroom faded into a distant hum as Thomas Reed stood in the shadowed corridor, his phone glowing with the security chief's message. Footage secured. His heart pounded. Elise's venomous words, "You're too filthy for this family," replaying like a blade twisting in his chest. He could still see Oliver's tearful eyes clutching Ayanna's hand, and the quiet strength in Ayanna's voice as she shielded his son from the sting. The mansion's opulence felt suffocating now, its portraits staring down like silent accusers. Thomas adjusted his navy suit, the fabric heavy with the weight of his misjudgment. He'd chosen Elise to fill the void left by Clara, but last night had cracked that illusion wide open. Today he'd face the truth head-on for Oliver's sake. In the mansion's library, morning light filtered through tall windows, casting soft patterns on the oak shelves. Oliver sat cross-legged on a leather armchair, his red shirt rumpled, light blue pants scuffed from restless fidgeting. His picture book, The Starry Night, lay open on his lap, but his small fingers traced the pages without focus. His brown eyes, so like Clara's, were clouded with worry, darting to the door as if expecting another blow. Thomas knelt beside him, his throat tight. "Hey, buddy," he said softly, brushing a lock of hair from Oliver's forehead. "You okay?" Oliver's lip trembled, and he clutched the book tighter. Why did Elise say that to Ayanna? She's not bad. She's like Mommy. The words hit Thomas like a fist, guilt and love warring in his chest. He'd failed to protect his son from Elise's cruelty, and the realization burned. Ayanna entered, her blue maid's uniform crisp, her straight hair pinned neatly in a bun. Her dark eyes held a quiet resolve, but Thomas caught the faint shadow of hurt beneath her composure. She carried a tray of juice and toast, setting it beside Oliver with a gentle smile. "Thought you might be hungry, little man," she said, her voice a soothing balm. Oliver's face lit up, the worry easing for a moment. "You didn't leave," he whispered, relief flooding his small frame. Ayanna's smile deepened, though her fingers lingered on the tray, betraying a flicker of tension. "Not going anywhere," she said, her tone firm but kind. Thomas watched the exchange, his heart aching at how effortlessly Ayanna anchored his son, while Elise had only sown fear. He stood, gesturing for Ayanna to step aside. In the corner near a shelf of leather-bound classics, he lowered his voice. "I heard what she said last night, Ayanna. I'm sorry." His words felt inadequate, a flimsy shield against the insult she'd endured. Ayanna met his gaze, her expression steady but guarded. "I've heard worse, Mr. Reed," she said quietly. "I stay for Oliver, not for what anyone thinks of me." Her strength struck him, a contrast to Elise's calculated charm. He wanted to ask about her past, why she'd left teaching, what scars she carried, but Oliver's presence tethered him to the moment. "You're more than a nanny to him," Thomas said, his voice thick. "You're keeping Clara alive for him." Ayanna's eyes softened, but she only nodded, deflecting the praise. The library door creaked open, and Elise swept in, her silk robe flowing, curly hair loosely pinned. Her smile was a polished mask, but her eyes flickered with unease as they landed on Thomas and Ayanna. "Good morning, darling," she said, her voice honey-sweet, as if the previous night's venom had never spilled. She approached Oliver, bending slightly. "You should be getting ready for school, sweetheart." Oliver shrank back, clutching his book, his small body a fortress against her. Thomas's jaw tightened. He stepped forward, blocking Elise's view of his son. "We need to talk," he said, his tone low, dangerous. Elise's smile faltered, but she recovered quickly, tossing her hair. "Of course, Thomas, but let's not bore the guest with domestic matters." They moved to a quiet alcove, the shelves shielding them from Oliver's ears. Thomas's pulse raced, the footage burning a hole in his mind. "I heard you last night," he said, his voice like steel. "You called Ayanna filthy. You insulted her in front of my son." Elise's eyes widened, but she laughed, a crystalline sound that grated on his nerves. "Oh, Thomas, you're overreacting. She misunderstood. I was just reminding her of her place." Her words dripped with condescension, and Thomas felt a surge of disgust. "Her place," he repeated, his voice rising. "She's been more of a family to Oliver than you've ever tried to be." Elise's smile vanished, her face hardening. "She's a nanny, Thomas, a servant. You need me, my connections, my status, to secure Oliver's future in our world." Thomas's hands clenched, the memory of Oliver's tearful plea, "She's like Mommy," fueling his anger. "Our world?" he said, his voice low but sharp. "You mean your world, Elise, one where my son's happiness doesn't matter." Elise stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. "Don't be naive. You're raising an heir, not a dreamer. Ayanna's filling his head with nonsense. Stories about Clara, books about stars. He needs discipline, not sentimentality. Thomas's chest tightened, her words echoing his own fears of failing Oliver. But then he saw Ayanna across the room, kneeling beside his son, pointing to a page in the book, her face alight with patience. She was the one who'd kept Oliver's heart whole, while Elise sought to mold him into a trophy. His phone buzzed, a message from security. Additional footage found. Thomas's blood ran cold. He opened the file, revealing not just the ballroom incident, but a recording from earlier that week. Elise whispering to Oliver in his room, "Your mother's gone, sweetheart. You need to stop clinging to her stories and start calling me mommy." Oliver's small sob in the video was a dagger to Thomas's heart. He looked at Elise, her face now pale, sensing the shift. "You've been trying to erase Clara," he said, his voice trembling with rage. "You think you can replace her by bullying my son and insulting the woman who actually cares for him?" Elise's eyes darted, searching for an escape. "I was helping him move on," she said, her voice thin. "For us, for our family." "There is no us," Thomas said, his words final. "Ayanna stays. You need to rethink your place here." Elise's face twisted, a flash of fury breaking through her composure. "You'll regret this, Thomas," she said, her voice low, venomous. "I know people who can make your life difficult." She turned on her heel, her robe swirling as she left the library. Thomas exhaled, his shoulders sagging. He looked at Oliver, now nestled against Ayanna, his small face buried in the book. The sight anchored him, but a new fear crept in. What else was Elise capable of? Ayanna glanced up, her dark eyes meeting his. "He's okay," she said softly, answering the question he hadn't asked. Thomas nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. The footage wasn't enough. He needed more to protect Oliver and Ayanna. He texted his security chief again. "Check her phone records." Elise's threat lingered, a storm brewing beneath her polished surface. Thomas moved to Oliver's side, sitting on the floor beside him. "What's Mommy's favorite star in the book?" he asked, his voice gentle. Oliver's face lit up, pointing to a glowing illustration. "The brightest one," he said. "Ayanna says it's like Mommy watching me." Thomas's throat tightened, his hand resting on Oliver's shoulder. He'd built an empire, but this small boy and the woman who guarded his heart, was worth more than any skyscraper. The library's quiet wrapped around them, a fragile shield against the chaos Elise had unleashed. Thomas knew this was only the beginning. Elise's connections ran deep, her ambitions sharper than her smile. But as he watched Ayanna turn the page, her voice weaving Clara's memory into Oliver's world, he felt a resolve harden within him. He'd failed his son once by trusting Elise. He wouldn't fail him again. The library's quiet lingered in Thomas Reed's mind as he drove through Harlem's bustling streets, the city's pulse a stark contrast to the mansion's sterile elegance. Oliver sat in the back seat, his small hands clutching the starry night, his red shirt a bright spot against the gray leather. Thomas's heart still burned from Elise's venomous words and the chilling footage of her pressuring Oliver to forget Clara. Ayanna's steady presence beside his son had been a lifeline, and now as he glanced at her in the passenger seat, her blue uniform crisp and her hair pinned in a neat bun, he felt a pang of gratitude mixed with guilt. He'd brought them here, to the heart of Ayanna's old neighborhood, to escape the tension, to give Oliver a moment to breathe. But the weight of Elise's threat, "You'll regret this," hung heavy, a shadow over the sunlit afternoon. Harlem unfolded around them, its brick buildings adorned with vibrant murals, children's laughter echoing from a nearby playground. Thomas parked near a community center, its faded sign reading Hope House. Oliver's eyes widened, his light blue pants scuffing as he slid out of the car, the book tucked under his arm. "Is this where you grew up, Ayanna?" he asked, his voice bright with curiosity. Ayanna's smile was soft, but her dark eyes held a flicker of something deeper. Pride, perhaps, laced with old wounds. "Right around the corner," she said, her voice warm. "This place was my safe spot as a kid. Still is." Thomas watched her, struck by the ease with which she carried herself here, so different from the guarded composure she wore in the mansion. They walked toward a courtyard where kids painted a mural, their hands smeared with color. Oliver clutched Ayanna's hand, his small frame relaxing in her presence. Thomas followed, his navy suit feeling out of place among the casual vibrancy. He'd suggested this outing on impulse, wanting to see Oliver smile, to understand Ayanna's world beyond the role of nanny. But now, standing amid the chatter and paint cans, he felt like an intruder in a place that pulsed with life. Ayanna knelt beside Oliver, pointing to a mural of a soaring bird. "Your mom loves stories about things that fly, didn't she?" she said. Oliver nodded, his brown eyes lighting up. "She said stars were birds that got stuck in the sky." Ayanna laughed, a sound so genuine it made Thomas's chest ache. He hadn't heard Oliver talk about Clara so freely in months. A woman approached, her gray hair braided tightly, her apron dusted with flour. "Ayanna Carter, is that you?" she called, her voice warm as a hearth. Ayanna's face broke into a grin. "Mrs. Rosa." She hugged the woman, who turned to Thomas with a knowing look. "This girl used to read to every kid in Harlem," Rosa said, her eyes twinkling. "Bought books with her own money when the library ran dry." Thomas glanced at Ayanna, surprised. She shrugged, deflecting the praise. "Just wanted kids to have what I didn't." Rosa's words stirred something in Thomas, a glimpse of Ayanna's past, her sacrifices. He saw Oliver watching, his small face alight with admiration, and felt a stab of guilt for how little he'd known about the woman who'd become his son's anchor. Oliver tugged Ayanna toward the mural, eager to join the kids' painting. "Can I make a heart for Mommy?" he asked, his voice small but hopeful. Ayanna nodded, handing him a brush. "Make it big so she can see it from the stars." Oliver dipped the brush in red paint, his movements careful but joyful, creating a lopsided heart that seemed to glow against the wall. Thomas watched, his throat tightening. Clara had painted with Oliver, her laughter filling their old home. Ayanna was keeping that alive, while Elise wanted to erase it. He stepped closer, his suit jacket brushing against a paint can. "You're good with him," he said quietly to Ayanna. "Better than I've been." Her dark eyes met his, steady but kind. "You're trying, Mr. Reed. That's what counts." The courtyard buzzed with life, but Thomas's mind drifted to the footage, to Elise's cold insistence that Oliver call her Mommy. His fingers twitched, itching to check his phone for updates from security. He'd asked them to dig into Elise's communications, suspecting she'd planned more than harsh words. Ayanna's voice pulled him back. "Mr. Reed, what's on your mind?" she asked, her tone gentle but direct. Thomas hesitated, then spoke, his voice low. "I'm sorry for what Elise said. I need to know, how do you do it? Stay so calm. Keep him safe. After—" He trailed off, unable to repeat her words. Ayanna's smile was sad, her fingers brushing the edge of her uniform. "I grew up hearing worse," she said. "When you're from a place like this, you learn to keep going. For kids like Oliver, it's worth it." Her words hit him hard, a reminder of the world beyond his skyscrapers. He wanted to ask more, about her life, her strength. But Oliver's excited shout interrupted. "Look, Ayanna, it's Mommy's heart." The mural's red heart was messy but vibrant, a child's love poured onto brick. Ayanna clapped, her laughter mingling with the kids. Thomas felt a pang, realizing how long it had been since he'd seen Oliver so free. He knelt beside his son, his suit creasing. "She'd love it, buddy," he said, his voice thick. Oliver beamed, paint smudged on his cheek. "Ayanna says Mommy's watching. Do you think so, Daddy?" Thomas's eyes stung, the weight of his failures as a father pressing down. "Yeah," he whispered. "She's watching." Rosa approached, carrying a tray of lemonade. "You're raising a good one," she told Thomas, nodding at Oliver, "and you've got Ayanna to thank." Thomas nodded, his gratitude for Ayanna deepening. But Rosa's next words shifted the air. "She gave up teaching to help kids like these. Got pushed out of her school for calling out unfair treatment. Never stopped her, though." Thomas's gaze snapped to Ayanna, who was helping a younger child with a brush. "Pushed out?" The revelation stirred a mix of admiration and anger. Anger at a world that dimmed her light, admiration for her resilience. He wanted to ask more, but his phone buzzed. A message from security. Found texts on Elise's phone. She's planning to discredit Ayanna. His stomach churned, the threat no longer abstract. Ayanna glanced at him, sensing the shift. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice steady but concerned. Thomas forced a smile, pocketing the phone. "Just work," he lied, unwilling to burden her. But his mind raced. Elise's text suggested a calculated move, one that could hurt not just Ayanna, but Oliver. He looked at his son, laughing as he painted, and felt a fierce resolve. He'd trusted Elise too long, letting her ambition cloud his judgment. Ayanna, with her quiet strength, had shown him what mattered. Oliver's happiness, Clara's memory. He touched Oliver's shoulder, his voice soft. "You're doing great, buddy." Oliver grinned, paint on his hands. "Can we come back tomorrow?" Thomas nodded, his heart swelling. "As often as you want." The courtyard's warmth wrapped around them, a stark contrast to the mansion's cold elegance. Thomas knew the fight with Elise was far from over. Her texts hinted at a plan to tarnish Ayanna's name, to secure her place in their world. But as he watched Oliver paint beside Ayanna, their laughter blending with the kids, he felt a clarity he hadn't known in years. He'd built an empire, but this small boy and the woman who guarded his heart, was his true legacy. The phone buzzed again, another message from security, but Thomas let it wait. For now he was here, in this moment, with the family that mattered. The Harlem courtyard's warmth lingered in Thomas Reed's heart as he sat in the mansion's dimly lit living room, the fire in the hearth casting flickering shadows across Oliver's colorful drawings pinned to the walls. The memory of his son's laughter, painting a heart for Clara under Ayanna's gentle guidance, clashed with the cold weight of the text messages on his phone. Elise's words, "Discredit Ayanna. She's a threat," burned in his mind, each syllable a betrayal of the family he'd thought he was building. Oliver's small voice defending Ayanna in Harlem echoed louder than the crackling flames. Thomas's navy suit felt like armor now, but it couldn't shield him from the guilt of letting Elise's ambition blind him. Tonight, he'd face her schemes head on, but the fear of what she might do next gnawed at his resolve. Oliver lay sprawled on the rug, his red shirt smudged with paint from the day's adventure. His light blue pants wrinkled as he clutched the starry night. His brown eyes, so like Clara's, were heavy with worry, darting to the door as if expecting Elise's sharp voice to shatter the quiet. Thomas knelt beside him, his heart aching at the sight of his son's unease. "You had fun today, didn't you?" he asked, forcing a smile. Oliver nodded, but his small fingers tightened on the book. "Ayanna said Mommy would like my heart. But what if Elise makes her go away?" The question hit Thomas like a blow, his son's fear mirroring his own. He'd failed to protect Oliver from Elise's cruelty, and the weight of that failure pressed against his chest. Ayanna entered, her blue uniform crisp, her straight hair pinned in a tight bun. Her dark eyes held a quiet strength, but Thomas caught the faint tension in her shoulders, a residue of Elise's venom. She carried a glass of milk for Oliver, setting it down with a gentle smile. "Time for a bedtime story, little man," she said, her voice a soothing anchor. Oliver's face softened, but he clung to her hand, his small voice trembling. "You won't let Elise send you away, right?" Ayanna's smile wavered, her fingers brushing his cheek. "I'm here for you, Oliver. Always." Thomas watched, his throat tightening. Ayanna's steadfastness was a lifeline, but Elise's texts spread the rumor she's untrustworthy, hinted at a storm brewing. He gestured for Ayanna to step aside, near the fireplace's glow. "You don't deserve this," he said, his voice low, thick with guilt. "What Elise said, what she's planning, it's wrong." Ayanna's gaze met his, steady but guarded. "I've faced worse, Mr. Reed," she said softly. "Growing up in Harlem, you learn to stand tall no matter what people throw at you." Her words carried a quiet defiance, but Thomas saw the flicker of old wounds in her eyes. He wanted to ask about her past, about the teaching jobs she'd lost, the battles she'd fought, but the urgency of Elise's schemes pulled him back. "She's trying to discredit you," he said, showing her the text. "I won't let her hurt you or Oliver." Ayanna's lips pressed into a thin line, but she nodded. "Do what you need to. I'm here for him." The door swung open, and Elise swept in, her silk dress shimmering gold, curly hair cascading loosely. Her smile was a calculated weapon, but her eyes flicked nervously to Thomas's phone. Darling, you're working late again, she said, her voice sweet but strained. She glanced at Oliver, then Ayanna, her smile tightening. Shouldn't the help be getting him to bed? Oliver shrank back, clutching his book, his small frame a shield against her. Thomas's jaw clenched, his anger flaring. He stepped forward, blocking Elise's view of his son. We need to talk, he said, his tone sharp enough to cut through her facade. Elise's eyes narrowed, but she followed him to the corner, away from Oliver's ears, her heels clicking like a countdown. The firelight danced across Elise's face, revealing a flicker of unease beneath her polish. What's this about? She asked, her voice low, almost daring. Thomas held up his phone, the text glowing like evidence in a trial. You're planning to ruin Ayanna, he said, his voice trembling with rage. Spreading lies, calling her untrustworthy. You think that'll make Oliver accept you? Elise's face paled, but she recovered quickly, tossing her hair. You're misreading this, Thomas. I'm protecting our family's image. She's a nobody from Harlem, filling his head with sentimental nonsense. You need me, my connections, to secure his future. Her words dripped with conviction, but Thomas saw the desperation beneath, the fear of losing her carefully crafted role. Protecting our image? He repeated, his voice rising. You insulted the woman who's kept my son's heart whole. You tried to erase Clara from his life. Elise's eyes flashed, her composure cracking. Clara's gone, Thomas. Oliver needs to move on, not cling to fairy tales about stars. I'm the one who fits in your world. Our world. Thomas's chest tightened, her words echoing his own doubts about raising Oliver alone. But then he saw Ayanna, kneeling beside Oliver, pointing to a page in the book, her voice soft as she read about dancing stars. She was the one who'd kept Clara's memory alive, while Elise sought to bury it. You don't know what family means, he said, his voice low, final. Ayanna's more family to him than you'll ever be. Elise stepped closer, her voice a hiss. You're making a mistake. I know people who can make this difficult. For you. For her. The threat landed like a spark in dry grass, igniting Thomas's resolve. He was about to retort when Oliver's small voice cut through. Ayanna! The boy had slipped from the rug, his book falling as he ran toward the door, his red shirt a blur. Thomas's heart lurched. Oliver, wait, he called, but the boy was already gone, his light blue pants vanishing into the hallway. Ayanna sprang up, her eyes wide with panic. He heard us, she said, her voice tight. He's scared. They raced after him, Thomas's pulse pounding. The mansion's corridors seemed endless, portraits glaring down as they searched. Ayanna's voice trembled as she called Oliver's name, her calm facade cracking. They found him in the garden, curled under an oak tree, his book clutched to his chest, tears streaking his face. I thought Elise would take Ayanna away, he sobbed, his small body shaking. Ayanna knelt, wrapping her arms around him, her bun loosening slightly. I'm not going anywhere, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Thomas dropped to his knees, his suit stained with grass, and pulled Oliver close. No one's taking her, he said, his voice fierce. I promise. Rosa, the neighbor from Harlem, appeared at the garden gate, her apron still dusted with flour. She'd been dropping off a pie, her eyes softening at the sight. That boy loves you both, she said to Thomas, her voice gentle but firm. And Ayanna, she's always been about giving, not taking. Thomas nodded, his gratitude for Ayanna swelling. Rosa's words confirmed what he'd seen in Harlem, Ayanna's heart, her sacrifices. He looked at his son, now calm in Ayanna's arms, and felt a clarity cut through his anger. Elise's schemes could wait. Right now, Oliver needed him, and Ayanna was the bridge to his son's heart. The garden's quiet wrapped around them, the city's hum a distant echo. Thomas knew Elise's threats were real. Her texts hinted at a plan to tarnish Ayanna's name, to secure her own place. But as he held Oliver, Ayanna's steady presence beside them, he felt a father's strength rising. He'd built an empire. But this boy, this woman, was worth fighting for. His phone buzzed again, another message from security, but he let it wait. For now they were together, and that was enough. The garden's quiet embrace lingered in Thomas Reed's heart as he stood in the mansion's grand dining room, the long mahogany table gleaming under the chandelier's soft glow. The air was thick with the clink of silverware and murmured conversations from a handful of real estate moguls, their tailored suits and practiced smiles a mirror of the world Thomas had built. Yet his pulse thrummed with the memory of Oliver's tear-streaked face under the oak tree, clinging to Ayanna, terrified she'd be taken away. Elise's venomous words, "You're too filthy for this family," and her scheming texts burned in his mind, fueling a resolve that felt like fire in his veins. Tonight, with Oliver and Ayanna nearby, he'd confront the woman he'd once trusted to share his life, and the truth would shatter the facade she'd so carefully crafted. Thomas adjusted his navy suit, his green eyes scanning the room. Elise glided among the guests, her gold-slit dress shimmering, curly hair cascading in a calculated halo. Her laughter rang out, charming a silver-haired investor. But Thomas saw the tension in her posture, the way her eyes flicked to him, sensing the storm brewing. Oliver sat at the table's edge, his red shirt slightly askew, light blue pants tucked under him as he clutched the starry night, his small face a mix of defiance and fear. Ayanna stood near the doorway, her blue uniform crisp, straight hair pinned in a neat bun, her dark eyes watchful yet calm. She was a quiet sentinel, her presence grounding Oliver in a way Thomas hadn't managed since Clara's death. His chest tightened, guilt and gratitude warring within him. The guests settled, their plates filled with delicate portions of seared scallops. Elise raised a glass, her voice smooth as silk. "To Thomas and to our future," she said, her smile radiant but brittle. The moguls clapped, but Oliver's small hand tightened on his book, his brown eyes darting to Ayanna. Thomas's jaw clenched. The memory of Elise's texts spread the rumor she's untrustworthy, flashing like a warning. He'd trusted her to be a partner, a mother to Oliver, but she'd tried to erase Clara and vilify Ayanna. He caught Ayanna's gaze, her steady nod giving him courage. This was it, the moment to act, to protect the family that truly mattered. Elise turned to Oliver, her smile tightening. "Oliver, why don't you tell Mr. Carter about your school? Show them what a fine young man you are." Her tone was honeyed, but her eyes held a command. Oliver shrank back, his small frame rigid, the book pressed against his chest like a shield. The table fell silent, the mogul's eyes shifting to the boy. Thomas's heart pounded, his son's discomfort a knife in his gut. Before he could speak, Oliver's voice, small but fierce, cut through. "Why did you say Ayanna's filthy?" he asked, his eyes locked on Elise. "She's the best person I know." The words hung in the air, raw and unyielding, drawing gasps from the guests. Elise's face froze, her glass trembling in her hand. Ayanna stepped forward, her voice soft but firm. "Oliver, it's okay. Let's not." Elise cut her off, her composure cracking. "That's enough, Oliver," she snapped, her voice sharp. "Ayanna doesn't belong in this family. Some people are meant to serve, not to sit at our table." The room went still, the moguls exchanging uneasy glances. Thomas's blood roared, his rage a living thing. He stood, his chair scraping against the floor, and pulled a small remote from his pocket. "You're wrong, Elise," he said, his voice low, dangerous, "and everyone here will see it." He pressed a button, and a screen descended from the ceiling, flickering to life with security footage from the night of the gala. The video played, Elise's voice echoing through the room. "Ayanna, you're too filthy for this family. Clean yourself up before you touch him again." Oliver's gasp in the footage, his small hand clutching Ayanna's, was a dagger to Thomas's heart. The moguls murmured, their faces hardening. Mr. Carter, a grizzled investor with kind eyes, shook his head, his pen tapping the table. Elise's face drained of color, her gold dress suddenly garish against her pallor. "That's not what I meant," she stammered, her voice thin. "It was a misunderstanding?" Thomas stepped forward, his eyes blazing. "A misunderstanding?" he said. "You tried to erase my son's mother, bully him into calling you mommy, and now you're scheming to ruin Ayanna. That's not a misunderstanding. It's who you are." Ayanna moved to Oliver's side, kneeling beside him, her bun loosening slightly as she whispered, "You're okay, little man." Oliver threw his arms around her, his book falling to the floor, his small body trembling. "You're my family," he whispered, loud enough for the room to hear. Thomas's throat tightened, the sight of his son's trust in Ayanna anchoring his resolve. He turned to Elise, his voice steady but lethal. "You don't belong here, Elise. We're done." The words landed like a gavel, final and unyielding. Elise's eyes widened, her hands shaking as she gripped the table. "You can't do this," she hissed. "I've built connections for you. For us. You need me." Thomas shook his head, his gaze unwavering. "I need my son to be happy. I need people who love him, not people who use him for status." The moguls watched, some nodding in approval, others whispering. Mr. Carter leaned forward, his voice gruff. "That was ugly, Miss Moreau. A family's more than connections." Elise's face twisted, fury breaking through her polished mask. "You'll regret this, Thomas," she said, her voice a venomous whisper. "I know people who can bury you. And her." She stormed out, her heels echoing like gunfire, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. Thomas moved to Oliver, kneeling beside him and Ayanna. "You did good, buddy," he said, his voice thick with pride. Oliver's eyes, wet with tears, met his. "I just want Ayanna to stay," he said, his small hand still clutching her sleeve. Ayanna's smile was soft, her dark eyes glistening. "I'm right here," she said, her voice a promise. Thomas looked at her, gratitude flooding his chest. She'd faced Elise's cruelty with grace, shielding Oliver when he couldn't. He wanted to say more, to ask about the pain she'd hinted at in Harlem, but the weight of the moment held him back. The moguls began to disperse, Mr. Carter pausing to pat Thomas's shoulder. "You made the right call," he said, his voice low. The dining room emptied, leaving only the three of them. Oliver hugged Ayanna tighter, his book now open on the table, its starry pages a reminder of Clara. Thomas's heart ached, a mix of relief and fear. Elise's threat lingered, her connections a real danger, but he pushed it aside. He'd seen the truth in Oliver's eyes and Ayanna's strength. "Thank you," he said to Ayanna, his voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, her expression steady but warm. "For Oliver," she said simply. Thomas looked at his son, his small face calm for the first time that night, and felt a father's resolve harden. Elise's world of status and schemes could crumble. He'd fight for the family that mattered. The dining room's heavy silence clung to Thomas Reed as he stood outside a modest Harlem library, its faded brick facade a stark contrast to the mansion's grandeur. The memory of Oliver's brave outburst and Ayanna's unflinching stand against Elise's venom, "You're too filthy for this family," burned in his chest, a fire fueled by pride and lingering fear. Elise's parting threat, "You'll regret this," echoed, but it was Oliver's trembling voice, declaring Ayanna his family, that anchored him now. Thomas's navy suit felt out of place in the bustling street, where kids laughed and vendors called out. He'd brought Oliver here, to Ayanna's old haunt, seeking refuge after the confrontation, hoping to rebuild what Elise had tried to shatter. But the weight of her schemes, exposed in texts and now public whispers, pressed against his resolve, a storm waiting to break. Inside the library, shelves sagged under the weight of well-loved books, their pages filled with stories that had once been Ayanna's escape. Oliver sat cross-legged on a worn rug, his red shirt vibrant against the muted colors. Light blue pants tucked beneath him as he clutched the starry night. His brown eyes, so like Clara's, sparkled with excitement as he flipped through the pages, but a shadow of worry lingered, as if Elise's words might still steal Ayanna away. Thomas watched his son, his heart aching with love and guilt. He'd stood up to Elise, but the cost, her threat to ruin them, gnawed at him. Ayanna, in her blue uniform with her straight hair pinned in a bun, knelt beside Oliver, reading softly about a star that found its way home. Her voice was a lifeline, steady and warm, pulling Thomas back from his spiraling thoughts. Mrs. Rosa, the Harlem neighbor with flour-dusted hands, bustled in, her apron tied tightly. "Ayanna, you've got this place glowing again," she said, her smile wide. She turned to Thomas, her eyes sharp but kind. "She used to read to every kid here, bought books with her own paycheck when the shelves were empty." Thomas's gaze shifted to Ayanna, her face softening at Rosa's words, though she waved off the praise. Just doing what I love, she said, her dark eyes meeting Oliver's, with a tenderness that made Thomas's chest tighten. He thought of Rosa's earlier revelation, Ayanna's fight against unfair treatment at her old school, and felt a surge of admiration. She'd given so much, yet Elise had called her filthy, tried to erase her from Oliver's life. Oliver looked up, his small voice breaking the quiet. Ayanna, you won't let Elise take you away, right? His question was a plea, his fingers gripping the book's edges. Ayanna's smile wavered, her hand resting on his shoulder. I'm right here, little man, she said, her voice thick with emotion. No one's taking me anywhere. Thomas's throat constricted, the memory of Oliver's defiance at the dinner table flooding back. His son had faced Elise's cruelty with a courage Thomas hadn't known he possessed, and Ayanna had stood tall, her words, I belong to Oliver's world, a shield for them both. He wanted to thank her, to say something that matched the depth of her impact, but words felt too small. Outside, the street hummed with life, but Thomas's phone buzzed, pulling him back to reality. A news alert flashed. Event planner Elise Moreau faces backlash after leaked video. The footage from the dinner, shared by Mr. Carter with a local reporter, had hit the press, with headlines decrying Elise's shocking prejudice. Thomas's pulse quickened, a mix of satisfaction and dread. He showed the screen to Ayanna, who scanned it, her expression unreadable. She brought this on herself, she said quietly, but her eyes held a flicker of pain, as if the public shaming stirred old wounds. Thomas nodded, his anger tempered by worry. Elise's connections ran deep. Her retaliation could still hurt them. Rosa approached carrying a tray of cookies. The whole neighborhood's talking, she said, her voice low. That woman thought she could tear down Ayanna. She's learning now. Thomas glanced at Ayanna, who was helping Oliver turn a page, her calm a stark contrast to the storm Elise had unleashed. She's losing contracts, he said, his voice tight, but she won't stop. Rosa's eyes narrowed. Ayanna's tougher than any of that. She gave up everything to help kids like these. Thomas's heart sank, thinking of Ayanna's sacrifices, her teaching career, her quiet fight against injustice. He looked at Oliver, his small face bright as Ayanna read, and felt a fierce resolve to protect them both. Oliver tugged Ayanna's sleeve, his voice soft. Can we make a corner for Mommy's stories here? His idea was simple, but it carried the weight of his love for Clara. Ayanna's eyes glistened, her smile radiant. A corner for Clara? That's perfect, Oliver. Thomas's chest ached. The memory of Clara reading to Oliver flooded back. He'd been so consumed by his empire, he'd forgotten how to keep her alive for his son. Ayanna had done that, weaving Clara's love into every story, every moment. He stepped closer, his voice low. Clara's books, he said. That's what we'll call the library. I'll fund it. For Oliver, for you. Ayanna's eyes widened, her hand pausing on the book. Mr. Reed, that's too much, she said, her voice trembling. It's not enough, Thomas replied, his gaze steady. You've given him more than I ever could. The library's warmth enveloped them, but Thomas's phone buzzed again. A voicemail from Elise. Her voice was cold, laced with fury. You think you've won? I'll make sure everyone knows Ayanna's a fraud. His stomach churned, the threat a blade at his throat. He deleted the message, unwilling to let it taint this moment. Oliver looked up, his small hand reaching for Ayanna's. You'll read to me forever, right? He asked, his voice small but hopeful. Ayanna's smile was a promise, her dark eyes shining. Forever, little man. Thomas watched, his heart swelling with gratitude. Elise's schemes could wait. This, his son's trust, Ayanna's strength, was his focus now. Rosa leaned in, her voice conspiratorial. Ayanna used to sneak books to kids who couldn't afford them. She'd stay late, teaching them to dream. Thomas's gaze flicked to Ayanna, who was laughing as Oliver pointed to a star in the book. He saw her not just as a nanny, but as a woman who'd fought for others, who'd carried her own pain to lift his son's. She's incredible, he said softly, more to himself than Rosa. The older woman nodded, her eyes warm. Keep her close, Mr. Reed. She's family. Thomas's throat tightened, the word resonating. Family wasn't Elise's world of status. It was this quiet library, this boy and the woman who'd become his light. The library's shelves stood like sentinels, guarding the stories that bound them. Thomas knelt beside Oliver, his suit creasing. "What's Mommy's favorite story today?" he asked, his voice gentle. Oliver grinned, pointing to a page. "The one about the star that never falls." Ayanna's eyes met Thomas's, a shared understanding passing between them. He'd face Elise's threats, but for now, he was here, with the family that mattered. The world outside could rage, but in this moment, they were unbreakable. The Harlem Library's warmth lingered in Thomas Reed's heart as he stood in the newly opened Clara's books, its shelves brimming with colorful spines and walls adorned with children's drawings. The memory of Oliver's hopeful voice, proposing a corner for Clara's stories, and Ayanna's steadfast presence beside him, anchored Thomas against the storm of Elise's public downfall. Her venomous words, "You're too filthy for this family," and her threatening voicemail had faded into irrelevance, replaced by the vibrant hum of this place, built to honor Clara's love for stories. Thomas's navy suit was gone, swapped for his simple sweater, a quiet rebellion against the world he'd once chased. Today, as sunlight streamed through the windows, he felt a flicker of peace, but the weight of his past failures as a father pressed against him, urging him to make things right for Oliver. Oliver darted between shelves, his red shirt a bright blur, light blue pants dusted with chalk from a morning of drawing. His brown eyes, so like Clara's, sparkled with excitement as he clutched the starry night, its pages now a bridge to his mother's memory. But a shadow lingered in his gaze, a remnant of fear that Elise's cruelty might still disrupt the safety he'd found. Thomas watched his son, his chest tight with love and regret. He'd stood up to Elise, exposed her prejudice, but the cost, Oliver's trembling trust, cut deeper than any business deal gone wrong. Ayanna moved through the room, her blue uniform replaced by a soft sweater, her straight hair falling loosely over her shoulders, a sign of her shift from nanny to something more. Her dark eyes radiated warmth as she helped a child find a book. But Thomas saw the weight she carried, the scars of a life spent defying judgment. The library buzzed with children and parents, gathered for the grand opening. A small stage stood at the center, draped with a banner reading Clara's books. Oliver tugged Ayanna's hand, his voice eager. "Can we read Mommy's story now?" he asked, holding up his book. Ayanna's smile was radiant, but her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Let's do it, little man," she said, her voice thick with emotion. She led him to the stage where a group of children sat cross-legged, their faces bright with anticipation. Thomas lingered at the edge, his heart swelling at the sight of his son, so small yet so brave, ready to share Clara's memory with the world. He'd built skyscrapers, but this library, this moment, was a legacy worth more than any empire. A girl, Sophia, 7 years old with braids and a shy smile, approached Oliver. Her eyes held a familiar sadness, the kind Thomas recognized from Oliver's own grief. "My mom likes stories too," Sophia said softly, clutching a worn copy of The Velveteen Rabbit. Oliver's face lit up, his book open in his hands. "Mine too. This one's about stars. Want to read with us?" Sophia hesitated, then nodded, sitting beside him. Ayanna knelt, her voice gentle. "You both have moms who live in stories, don't you?" Sophia's eyes widened, a spark of hope breaking through her shyness. Thomas's throat tightened, the sight of his son reaching out to another grieving child stirring a deep ache. He'd failed to nurture Oliver's heart after Clara's death, but Ayanna had woven a tapestry of love that held them all. Mrs. Rosa bustled in, her apron swapped for a festive dress, her gray hair neatly braided. She caught Thomas's eye, her smile warm but knowing. "This place is Ayanna's heart," she said, gesturing to the shelves. "She gave up teaching to fight for kids like these, even when it cost her." Thomas's gaze flicked to Ayanna, who was laughing as Oliver and Sophia flipped through their books. Rosa's words from Harlem echoed, Ayanna's dismissal from her school for challenging unfair treatment, and a surge of admiration washed over him. She'd carried her pain silently, pouring it into helping others. He wanted to ask her about it, to understand the battle she'd fought, But the joy in her eyes as she read with the children stopped him. This was her victory. Ayanna stood on the stage, her voice clear as she began reading The Starry Night. Once a star fell from the sky, but it found a home in someone's heart. Oliver leaned against her, his small hand on her arm, his face alight with pride. Sophia listened, her eyes fixed on Ayanna, as if the story held her mother's memory too. Thomas's chest ached, memories of Clara reading to Oliver flooding back, her laughter, her gentle touch. He'd buried himself in work, thinking money could replace her, but Ayanna had shown him otherwise. She'd kept Clara's love alive, not just for Oliver but now for children like Sophia. He stepped closer, his sweater soft against his skin, a symbol of the man he was becoming. Oliver looked up, his voice small but clear. Ayanna, you're like Mommy's star, right? The question was innocent, but it landed like a stone in Thomas's heart. Ayanna's breath caught, her eyes glistening as she nodded. Maybe I am, she said, her voice trembling. But you're the brightest one, Oliver. The children clapped, their laughter filling the room. But Thomas saw the tear she brushed away, the weight of her own struggles surfacing. He moved to the stage, kneeling beside Oliver. You're making Mommy proud, he said, his voice thick. Oliver's smile was a gift, fragile but real. And Ayanna too? He asked. Thomas glanced at her, his heart full. Especially Ayanna. Rosa approached, her eyes twinkling. You've got a good one here, she said, nodding at Ayanna. She's family, you know. The word hit Thomas hard, a truth he'd been circling. He looked at Ayanna, her sweater loose, her hair catching the light. I know, he said softly, and I want her to stay that way. Ayanna's eyes met his, surprise flickering before softening into warmth. For Oliver, she said, her voice steady but heavy with meaning. Thomas nodded, but his heart whispered more. For all of them. He'd invited her to stay as family, not a nanny, and the weight of that choice settled over him, a promise he meant to keep. Sophia tugged Oliver's sleeve, her voice shy. Can we make a book together? For our moms? Oliver's eyes widened, his excitement contagious. Yeah, with stars and rabbits. Ayanna laughed, her voice a melody that eased the room's tension. Thomas watched, his guilt easing. He'd failed Oliver by trusting Elise, but this moment, this library, these children, was a chance to rebuild. He joined them, sitting cross-legged on the stage, his hands clumsy as he helped Sophia hold a crayon. What's your mom's favorite story? He asked, his voice gentle. Sophia's smile was small but bright. She liked bunnies who became real. Thomas's eyes stung, thinking of Clara, of Oliver, of the family they were forging. The library's shelves stood like guardians, holding stories that bound them. Thomas looked at Ayanna, her face alight as she read, and felt a clarity he'd lost since Clara's death. Elise's threats, her crumbling empire, were distant now. This boy, this woman, this place was his truth. He'd fight for it no matter what came next. The soft hum of Clara's books lingered in Thomas Reed's heart as he stood in the heart of Manhattan, surrounded by the sleek glass walls of a prestigious real estate gallery. The space, once Elise Moreau's domain for orchestrating high-profile events, now buzzed with a different energy, hopeful, vibrant, alive with the chatter of families and the rustle of pages. A year had passed since Elise's venomous words, "You're too filthy for this family," had shattered Thomas's illusions, and her public downfall had faded into a distant echo. The memory of Oliver's courage, Ayanna's unwavering strength, and the quiet triumph of their new beginning in Harlem fueled Thomas's resolve. Tonight, in this unlikely venue, he stood not as a billionaire, but as a father, watching his son and Ayanna weave a legacy that Clara would have cherished. Oliver darted through the crowd, his red shirt a bright beacon, light blue pants slightly wrinkled from an excited morning. His brown eyes, so like Clara's, gleamed with pride as he clutched a handmade book, its cover adorned with a starry heart he'd drawn with Sophia, the shy girl from the library. The book, Stars and Rabbits, was their creation, a tapestry of stories about mothers who lived in the pages they loved. Thomas watched his son, his chest tight with a love that felt both fragile and fierce. Oliver's small hand had trembled when he'd first shared his idea, fearing it wouldn't be enough. Now, as families gathered for the exhibition, Thomas saw the boy's confidence bloom, a testament to the family they'd built. Ayanna moved gracefully among the guests, her sweater soft against her frame, her straight hair falling loosely, no longer bound by the tight bun of her nanny days. Her dark eyes shone with quiet joy, but Thomas caught the flicker of vulnerability beneath. A woman who'd faced rejection, yet poured her heart into this place. She paused beside a display of children's books, her fingers brushing the cover of The Starry Night. "This one started it all," she said to a parent, her voice warm but thick with emotion. Thomas's throat tightened, remembering her reading to Oliver, keeping Clara's memory alive when he'd been too lost in grief to try. Ayanna had become more than family. She was the heartbeat of their new world. Sophia, her braids bouncing, stood beside Oliver, her copy of The Velveteen Rabbit tucked under her arm. Her shy smile had grown bolder over the year, nurtured by Clara's books and Oliver's friendship. "Our book's up there," she whispered to Oliver, pointing to a glass case where stars and rabbits glowed under soft lights. Oliver grinned, his small hand grabbing hers. "Mommy's gonna love it," he said, his voice certain. Thomas's eyes stung, the weight of Clara's absence mingling with pride in his son's resilience. He'd failed Oliver by trusting Elise, but Ayanna and this library had given him a chance to rebuild, page by page. Mrs. Rosa bustled through, her dress vibrant with Harlem spirit, her gray hair neatly braided. She caught Thomas's eye, her smile a mix of pride and mischief. "This place is Ayanna's soul," she said, gesturing to the shelves. "And that boy of yours, he's carrying her light now." Thomas nodded, his heart swelling. Rosa's stories of Ayanna's past, buying books for kids, fighting for fairness, had painted a picture of a woman who'd turned pain into purpose. He wanted to thank her, to say something that matched her impact. But the crowd's murmur grew as the exhibition began, pulling him back to the moment. Ayanna stepped to a small podium, her presence commanding yet gentle. "Clara's books is about keeping stories alive," she said, her voice steady but laced with emotion. "For kids like Oliver and Sophia, who carry their loved ones in every page." The crowd hushed, parents nodding, children clutching their own books. Oliver tugged her sleeve, his voice small but clear. "Tell them about Mommy's stars," he said. Ayanna's eyes glistened, and she knelt, hugging him. "Your mom's stars are in every story here," she said, her voice breaking. Thomas's chest ached, memories of Clara's bedtime readings flooding back, her laughter, her warmth. Ayanna had kept that alive, not just for Oliver, but for every child here. Sophia stepped forward, her voice trembling but brave. "My mom liked bunnies," she said, holding up her book. "Oliver and I made a story for them both." The crowd murmured in approval, and Thomas saw tears in his parents' eyes. He moved closer, his sweater brushing against the display. "You did good, Sophia," he said softly, his voice thick. She smiled, her shyness melting. Oliver beamed, his book raised high. "It's for all the moms in the stars," he declared, drawing a ripple of laughter and applause. Thomas's heart swelled, pride and grief intertwining. He'd built towers, but this book, this moment, was a legacy worth more. The gallery's director, a woman who'd once worked with Elise, approached Thomas. "This exhibition is a triumph," she said, her eyes on the children's books. "Elise would have hated it. Too real for her world." Thomas's jaw tightened. The memory of Elise's downfall, a scathing article, lost contracts flashing briefly. He pushed it aside, focusing on Oliver and Sophia, who were now reading from their book to a small crowd. Ayanna joined them, her voice weaving their words into a melody of love and loss. Thomas watched, his guilt easing. He'd trusted the wrong person once, but Ayanna had shown him what family meant. Stories shared, hearts held close. Rosa leaned in, her voice low. "Ayanna gave up everything for kids like these. You're lucky to have her." Thomas nodded, his gaze fixed on Ayanna. "I know," he said, his voice barely audible. "She's family." The word carried a weight he hadn't fully grasped until now. He stepped to the podium, his hands unsteady. "Clara's books is more than a library," he said, his voice raw. "It's a home for kids who need it, thanks to Ayanna." The crowd clapped, but Oliver's cheer was loudest. his small arms wrapping around Ayanna's waist. Sophia joined, her shy smile radiant. Thomas's eyes stung. The sight of this new family forged through pain and love, overwhelming him. Ayanna met his gaze, her dark eyes shining with gratitude and something deeper. "For Clara," she said softly, her hand on Oliver's shoulder. Thomas nodded, his throat tight. "For all of us," he replied. The crowd moved through the exhibits, but Thomas stayed rooted, watching Oliver and Sophia flip through their book, their laughter a testament to Ayanna's gift. He'd built an empire, but this library, these children, was his true wealth. The gallery's lights cast a glow over them, a beacon of the family they'd become, bound by stories and stars.